"You could at least try to look like you can afford the blouse," she said, loud enough for 3 aisles to hear, then tilted her head and smiled like she'd just delivered a verdict. I remember the way the fluoro LED lights in that downtown boutique made her diamonds glitter like a constellation. I remember everyone turning to look at me, at my thrifted coat, my cracked foam screen, the grocery bag I'd been using as a purse, and feeling my face go hot. Like somebody was pouring shame down my neck. "Excuse me?" I managed. My voice came out thin. The woman next to her, an Instagram-perfect carousel of curated outrage, laughed, and someone else pulled out a phone and started recording. I could hear the camera shutter in my chest. "Do you have like a job?" the woman asked me, ridiculous and casual as if she were reading a menu. "Or is this a lifestyle?" "That's none of your business," I said, which sounded nothing like the speech I'd practiced in the mirror. She laughed the exact way the YouTube comments would laugh later when the clip went viral. "Honey, when you apply for a house loan, they'll look at that jacket and know you lied." Her words landed like a punch. I stood there with the fabric of my life inside my coat pocket, bank statements, business plans, credit receipts, and I wanted to tell her that I was trying, that I had a meeting with a loan officer in 48 hours to try to save my bakery, that I'd been balancing invoices and PTA meetings and 2 part-time jobs for the past 5 years. Instead, I walked out, the video following me like a shadow, but I had no idea what I was about to discover. Have you ever been humiliated in public? Would you have done anything different? Tell me, because I didn't run or scream or fight. I called my friend Carlos, I called my mother, I cleaned the crumbs out of my coat, and I told myself not to cry in the parking lot. I posted the clip with my own caption. "This is what it feels like when someone assumes your life is a joke." If anyone reading this has ever had a clip of them go viral for the wrong reasons, you know the next second when the algorithm decides your life is worthy of commentary. The video got 20,000 views in an hour. People sent me messages. Some kind strangers offered to buy me my groceries. Others told me to block the account that captured it. A lot of people judged me for the coat, as if a garment could define a person. 2 days later, the loan officer called. "Miss Alvarez?" The voice was crisp, polite. "Good news, your loan has been approved." Relief felt like sunlight after a week of rain. I remember laughing into the phone and telling the woman across the boutique, whose laugh I still heard like an echo, that I had a meeting with a loan officer and a business plan and a dream, and that I'd get my own little shop someday. "You'll be fine," my mother said. "You saved every tip for 2 years. You deserve this." But then, a week later, I was scrolling through my phone and I saw her. Humiliation was still a thumbnail on my feed when a local journalist tagged me in a thread about wealthy elites behaving badly. The woman in the boutique was in the photo header of one of the journalist's pieces, but the byline made my stomach drop. Evelyn Hart, CEO of Cascade Trust, photographed shopping in University Village. Cascade Trust was the big bank in Bellevue, the one with the art glass lobby and the rooftop garden, the one that underwrote small business loans and corporate bonds, and whose CEO had an annual compensation package that local papers estimated at north of $12 million. The article said she sat on an $847 million institutional portfolio and owned a $12 million house in Medina. It said she championed financial inclusion programs in headlines and donated to local shelters on camera. The woman who'd sneered at my coat? The same Evelyn Hart who'd somehow personally approved my loan, or at least her office had. And suddenly, the meeting with the loan officer wasn't comforting. It felt like an insult. "She's the CEO," I told Carlos, who sat cross-legged on my kitchen floor, assembling cupcakes for an order I'd missed. He put down the piping bag and stared. "She approved my loan? That's weird," he said. "But isn't that a good thing? CEO approved it. She gives money to small businesses on TV. It doesn't feel like a good thing when she filmed me like I was a sideshow," I said. "Why would the CEO be in that boutique? What kind of power play is this?" What happened next changed everything. I messaged the woman who'd sent me the article. Her name was Lila, a freelance reporter for the Seattle Ledger. "I have goosebumps," she wrote back. Want me to look into this? If she's the same Evelyn Hart, there's a pattern. We dug. Lila did what journalists do. Public records. FOIAs when needed. Archived PR statements, donations, board meeting minutes, and, crucially, a tip from a whistleblower in the bank's small business lending division. That whistleblower, a man named Greg, had screenshots. Greg was scared, so he emailed them from a burner account. She says show them, then laugh. Then they're easier to deny later. At first, I thought he was talking about jokes in the boardroom. Then he sent a screenshot of a calendar invite. Personal approvals. Saturday walk-ins. Evelyn. That sent a chill down my spine. Little did I know that those screenshots were going to become the backbone of everything we would do next. You won't believe what I found next, and I need you to ask yourself, have you ever been told by someone in power that your pain doesn't matter because your clothes didn't cost enough? Would you have kept digging? We started to build a case, not a lawsuit at first, but a dossier. My Ring doorbell footage, I had it because I'd been worried about break-ins, showed the exact moment Evelyn left the boutique. There was a shot of her laughing, her Hermes scarf snapping like a flag. Lila found 2 other local incidents, small. Business owners who'd been publicly shamed by people who identified themselves as friends of Evelyn. Patterns emerged, mocking videos, then a later charitable loan approval posted on Cascade Trust's community outreach page. I remember sitting at my counter with a legal pad and Margaret Chen's card, thinking about what it would cost to sue a multinational when my overdraft was still $47.50. Margaret's good, Carlos said. She's tough. She once took down a developer who tried to snatch a whole block of affordable housing. I called Margaret. She listened. Then she said something that made the air go thin. If these are coordinated, it's not just personal humiliation. It's a gross conflict of interest. If a CEO is using her social capital to humiliate people, then approving loans to control narratives, regulators are going to be very interested. Margaret was right, and she had the scars to prove it. She'd been practicing regulatory and civil litigation for 30 years and had a nose for corporate bull. But know this, she warned. We're going up against lawyers whose desks are bigger than my apartment. They will try to bury evidence, to make you out to be the disruptor. We'll need proof, and you need to be ready for the grenade. 3 times in the next month, the case seemed to die. First setback. The bank's legal department invoked privilege and blocked access to internal emails. They called Lila and said, "This is a smear." They offered me a donation to the bakery if I agreed to delete my video. "Sellout," one of the commenters said, "take the money." I almost did. I sat on the bench outside my building with their check-heavy offer in my palm and my business plan in the mailbox. My rent was due. The bakery's oven needed a new part. Carlos said, "If you accept that money, you keep serving muffins with their logo stamped on them." I left the check torn in half. Second setback. A witness recanted. The small boutique clerk who'd filmed me said she'd misremembered, claimed she only filmed because it was funny. Public opinion wobbled. People loved a villain until they didn't. Third setback. The bank offered public praise for community outreach, and the local paper ran a puff piece about Evelyn Hart's philanthropy. The piece closed with, "Cascade Trust remains committed to small businesses." The comments were a hornet's nest. But then Margaret did what Margaret does. She subpoenaed deleted files and worked with a digital forensics firm to recover texts. She asked Greg to come forward officially. He was terrified, but he stepped into a conference room with the recorder on and told us everything. "And she said what?" I asked him. "She texted us after," Greg said. He was a small man with tired eyes. She texted, "They're so easy. Watch me humiliate one today. Approval will follow. It's so satisfying." 47 deleted messages, Margaret said softly. 47 messages between her and her executive assistant, saved by a cloud backup. There, not deletions anymore. When the recovered messages arrived, the air in the room smelled like concrete. In one, Evelyn typed, "By Christmas, I'll be sipping champagne in Tuscany with your money," and sent a laughing emoji. In another, "Make sure the lines of denial are already filed. He'll never figure it out. He's completely clueless. Those messages were dynamite. They were proof that the humiliation wasn't accidental. It was part of a power play. A social experiment cloaked as philanthropy, with the bank's approvals used as the payoff. "Are you sure about those?" someone in the bank's PR team asked during a preliminary hearing. Evelyn, being Evelyn, smiled. "I'm going to take you for everything you've got," she said in a deposition that later leaked. Public opinion is a powerful lever. I remember hearing that quote in the courtroom, my mouth dry. It was one of the moments when things tilted, when arrogance meets consequence. But nothing is as linear as you think in these stories. 3 more times it looked like the deck was stacked. Moment where it almost failed again. Evidence got redacted. The bank's lawyers claimed certain messages were personal, unrelated to corporate actions. They fought subpoenas tooth and nail. Our journalist sources got threatened. My landlord said the bank had called her to see how much I paid in rent. What did we do? We fought back. Margaret filed for a motion to compel. Lila kept publishing. Community groups rallied. Small business owners whose loans had also been personally approved by Evelyn came forward with ring footage and screenshots. One woman, a daycare owner in White Center, produced a video of Evelyn arriving at her shop, filming the kids, and then posting about teaching them about fiscal responsibility. The daycare owner, Juanita, was on our side now, furious and armed with proof. Anyone who's been through small business lending knows the rejection rate is brutal, Juanita said in an interview that went viral. But she would shame and then approve. It was performative charity. What happened next was the first real pivot. The regulatory body for state banks opened an investigation. The Department of Commerce sent a notice to Cascade Trust. The bank's stock dipped. Evelyn's PR machine sputtered. The courtroom, when it came, was procedural and theatrical at the same time. Margaret loved the way the judge cut through bullshit. We're here to consider whether a CEO used her corporate power to manipulate and humiliate small business owners for personal amusement and whether those actions violated fiduciary duty and created a hostile environment, the judge said. "You could be looking at a breakout," Lila whispered to me the night before the hearing. This is the kind of story that brings down chairs. The hearing began with a pile of exhibits, each one a nail. Exhibit A, my ring footage of the boutique encounter. Exhibit B, the recovered 47 messages. Exhibit C, internal emails showing a directive to document humiliations with the purpose of creating case studies for PR. Exhibit D, a pattern of loan approvals following viral shame moments. Evelyn took the stand and did what people like her always do. She smiled, told anecdotes about her humble childhood, and used the word accountability in sentences that tried to make her sound like a reformer. At one point, she looked at me and said, with that tone of a woman used to being admired, "We are trying to educate." There's a difference between humiliation and pedagogy. Is that what you call recording someone and posting it to a private group where executives mock them? Margaret asked, steady as a metronome. The courtroom went quiet. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "You know what I say to people like that?" she asked, voice low, venomous, and perfectly rehearsed. "You're too stupid to even see what's coming." A murmur rolled through the room. It wasn't the smartest line to use when microphones were turned on. Margaret's cross-examination was surgical. "How many times did you personally approve loans following incidents where someone was publicly shamed?" "Several," Evelyn admitted. "We do community engagement. When you approve those loans, were there terms? Were there strings attached?" Evelyn shifted. "We have terms. We screen. Did you ever use humiliation as a selection criterion?" "No," she said. She avoided looking at the 47 messages for maybe the first time since she heard the number uttered in public. Then Margaret produced a printout. "Read the entry dated September 12th, she said. Evelyn squinted. The hallway was silent except for the rustle of legal pads. "Make sure she understands she's lucky. Approve $150,000 loan. Document reaction. We'll spin this. The judge cleared his throat. Evelyn's smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. Explain that, the judge asked. I was trying to create teachable moments, Evelyn said weakly. Teachable moments, Margaret repeated. By humiliating someone on camera and then dangling financial approval? But then, a dramatic pause, Evelyn's legal team tried to pivot. They argued the messages were taken out of context, that the bank's corporate grant programs required compelling narratives. Their PR said we were telling human stories. What happened next was the part that changed everything, Lila told me months later, when we were both on the rooftop of my little bakery, watching scaffolding and cranes and life. Because audiences, when you give them a villain, they want justice, and when you give them receipts, they stay. We had receipts. The Department of Commerce fined Cascade Trust. The bank's board demanded Evelyn's resignation. A local newspaper ran an editorial titled, "Humiliation Isn't a Charity." The CEO, whose net worth the tabloids had pinned at $847 million, suddenly found herself being photographed leaving a downtown building with a small duffel bag and no smile. What did Evelyn get in return? A forced resignation. A severance package later trimmed by legal obligations and a reputation that turned to ash. She tried to say she was being targeted, that corporate policy had been misunderstood. The charity boards rescinded invitations. A foundation she had founded returned a $5 million donation to the city coffers. She was disinvited from panels. They asked for restitution. The regulatory settlement included a clause. Cascade Trust had to create a small business fund of $2 million dedicated to transparent, non-performative loans run by an independent committee. They had to institute staff training and a hotline. They had to write apology letters to the people publicly shamed. They had to make my loan terms fair. 0% for the first year, low APR after, and an advisory committee seat for a local business owner. They also had to publicly release the internal communications that had once been internal. I stood at a podium months later in a community center full of people who had once been mocked and found their courage. I said, it wasn't about me or the coat. It was about being treated as a person. People applauded. Leela's article won an award. Greg was rehired at the bank under whistleblower protections. Juanita expanded her daycare. Margaret drank a lot of bad coffee and wrote good letters. But here's the twist that made it actually delicious. Evelyn's last public move was to appear on a morning show and say, I was trying to help people see their potential, which would have been almost pitiful if she hadn't ended up walking down a street in Bellevue a few months later, her scarf gone, carrying a tote bag with a boutique name tag sewn inside the pocket. Some people think I went too far. I wrote later in a post, was I wrong to use everything I had to make sure she could no longer do that to people? Tell me I'm not crazy. Was I perfect through all this? Not at all. There were nights I dreamed of the viral clip replaying, and I fantasized about posting a montage of her own humiliations. I didn't. There were times I thought about accepting their initial donation for the bakery and moving on. I almost let fear buy my silence. Anyone who's been through months of fighting a corporation knows the exhaustion, the threats, the PR smear, the fear of being painted as a troublemaker. I cried in the supply closet once when bills stacked higher than hope. Did we win? We won parts. The settlement didn't erase the sting. The bank paid fines, not jail time. Evelyn didn't go to prison, and she later got a cushy consulting gig that made some of the comment sections combust with anger. But her social license was gone, and the fund we established helped 16 small businesses in the first year alone. $150,000 in loans, $12,000 in grants, mentorship, access to accounting software. It was real. The specific numbers people love. $150,000 small business loan approved for my bakery expansion. 47 deleted messages recovered and used as evidence. $2 million fund created by Cascade Trust as part of the settlement. An estimated $847 million in assets under Evelyn's management that couldn't buy back the dignity she lost. What happened after was simple life. I opened the bakery, We named a pastry after the community that helped us get there. The Combat Croissant, which sold out the first weekend. I married the man who delivered my flour. We had a small, imperfect wedding at the bakery at dawn, with the smell of coffee and friends in threadbare jackets. Carlos ran our catering. Margaret took a vacation, then took on more cases. Leela kept writing the stories companies would rather not see. And Evelyn? I ran into her months later at a charity auction. She was polite, hollow-eyed, and wearing a borrowed suit. She tried to speak to me about lessons learned. Less learned, I asked. She looked at me like she actually hadn't understood the word humiliation until it had been redefined for her. I told her, you can approve a loan, or you can approve a life's dignity. You chose one. There was a long pause. She said quietly, I misjudged people. Do you know what that sounds like? I asked. It sounds like someone who had always been right. But then, another dramatic pause. Evelyn started volunteering at a nonprofit. People said it was performative. Others said she was sincere. I never know what to believe anymore. What did I learn? That people who weaponize power rarely stop until someone holds up a mirror. That being poor or looking poor is not an invitation to abuse. That institutions will sometimes bury inconvenient truths to protect websites and stock prices, unless enough people demand otherwise. Would you have fought? Did you know a single tweet could start a regulatory probe? Are you surprised a CEO could be so petty she would mock a stranger for a coat and call it community research? Let me know in the comments. Some will say we should have quietly taken the money and been grateful. Some will say I used the most powerful tool I had, the public record, to get justice. You tell me, was I right or did I go too far? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories where people fight back against the kind of small-minded cruelty that thinks a garment defines a person, subscribe and hit that bell. I've got dozens more like this one.